So today we are going to talk about jobs. What are the jobs in Jenkins and what are the different basic configurations of a job when we create a job in Jenkins. Basically, Jenkins job is nothing but set of commands which we ask Jenkins to perform. So basically these commands would be, let's say for example, you want to build an application. Build in the sense not the development part I'm saying. Once the developer develops the code, he is done with the development. Now from that point onwards, the entire build phase, like different build phases he needs to perform in order to get that build to the get that build deployed to some kind of an environment. So Jenkins job is set of instructions provided to Jenkins. So for example, one is like what you want Jenkins to do once the developer completes the development of the code and he pushes the code to say Git repository. So now what you want Jenkins to do from that onwards, say pull the code from Git repo, right? Second thing what you want Jenkins to do, run mvn compile. I am taking just an example with respect to our library. Okay, so pull the code from Git repo is the first thing which you want Jenkins to do. Then run the mvn, say mvn clean you would like Maven to do, so that the target directory, the output directory would be cleaned and you will be able to perform the entire build lifecycle from scratch, right? So mvn clean is the second step. The third one you want is run mvn compile, so that your application would be compiled. So Maven will take care of, before it will trigger the compilation, Maven will take care of downloading the dependencies, adding those dependencies to the class path of your project, and all those things Maven will take care of. But the main phase you want to run is mvn compile. Then fourth, run mvn package. So once the compilation, mvn test, so you would like to trigger the unit test cases, right? Once the unit testing is done and if it is successful, then you would like to go for mvn package. So herein Maven will package your .class files of your application in a jar file, and the final step you want is mvn deploy. So these are the steps, right, which you want want Jenkins to perform. So this is nothing but a job. Okay, job is nothing but set of instructions provided to Jenkins, right? Now the jobs could be different also, like the job could also have a instruction to trigger, let's say, Selenium tests. It could be anything depending upon what kind of application you are working on, right? So that is nothing but a job. And what is build then? So there is one very important, a common term you will encounter while running, now learning Jenkins is build. So this is about job. Now what is build? So Jenkins build is nothing but the execution of a job. Jenkins build is execution of a particular Jenkins job. So let's say you have developed this Jenkins job, which is pulling the code from the Git repository, then it is cleaning up the Maven output directory, then it is compiling the application, then running the unit test, packaging and deploying it to the Nexus repository. Right. So this is the job. Now when you execute the job, so what you are doing is nothing but you are running a build. So that execution of a job is called build. So you can run this job multiple times. Right. So if you execute this job first, then you will call that I have executed a build of a job. Then once you will execute it another time, there would be another build execution of the job. So build is nothing but the execution of a job, and job is nothing but the set of instructions you provide to Jenkins to perform the different build life cycles. Right? These are the main two concepts. Please understand these two very important concepts. Now having said this, let's go and create our very first job. So how can you create from a Jenkins dashboard? You will get a link over here for create a job. You can also create the job from this new item as well. Let's do it from here. Create job. Now you will get different types of jobs here. So we would be creating first freestyle job. Pipeline job we would be talking about afterwards. Let's talk about first this freestyle job. Pipeline job is where you write the job or the same thing. I mean, it's a job again, a set of instructions again, but pipeline is where you write those instructions in terms of a groovy language, and freestyle project is where you define that job with the help of UI of the Jenkins. So in the UI itself you get different configuration settings, and there you configure that job. So that is freestyle. And this is pipeline, which is a scripted job, you can see. Right? We will talk about the pipeline little later, but here we need to provide any unique name to the job. So let's say my first Jenkins job. This is the name. I'll go for the freestyle job for now. Let's understand different configuration settings of a freestyle job. We will create one freestyle job, and then we will trigger that job manually first. Then we will trigger that job with some once I push the code to the Git repository, I would trigger that job. So we will see different ways to trigger the job. Okay, but before that, let's explore the different settings of a freestyle project, and then we will create a pipeline job also, and that also we will trigger in different ways. So freestyle job, freestyle project I mean. Let's click on OK. So this will take us to the okay. So it says that the name already exists. Okay, let me choose some different name. Maybe I have it. Yeah, I have it actually. So I would say my Jenkins job 2. I will go with the freestyle project. Let's click on OK. This will take us to this configuration page of the job. So here you can describe like what your job, this particular Jenkins job is doing. So let's say this is a demo Jenkins job. Now here you will see the different settings of a particular job. So this discard old builds is, as I told you, builds are nothing but the executions of a particular job. So once you execute the job, you will get the different builds created. Build 1, build 2. So nothing but execution 1, execution 2, execution 3, like that. right? So if you do not want to keep your old builds, right, then you can check mark this. So this will delete the old builds, right? Now if you check this, then Jenkins asks you like based on what it should take a decision of deleting a particular build. I mean, how many days you want your old builds to be kept. Let's say 10 for example. So what Jenkins will do, Jenkins will delete all the builds of a particular job which are older than 10 days. Then you can also specify how many maximum builds you want to keep for a particular project. So let's say I would say 5 jobs, right? So these things you can configure here. Then this project is parameterized. Now what is this? Like the way we can send the different arguments to a function. Let's say function 1 is calling function 2, and then function 1 is sending some arguments to that function 2. So function 2 needs to have the parameters to accept those arguments, right? So similarly, we can have the job, one job sending some arguments to another job, right? We will see this once we will write a job node for our library project or maybe for our web application project. Then we will see how can we send the arguments from one job to another. But this is that setting, like which basically defines the particular job, has a parameters. It requires some parameters to be sent, and if this needs the parameters, then you will check mark this and then you will add the parameters. It's like defining a parameter for a function, simple as that. So we have a different set of parameters: boolean parameter, choice parameter, file parameter, different kinds of parameters, string parameter. Mostly you would see the string parameters and boolean parameters usage. Okay, so this is what the setting is. Now this, let's forget about the throttle builds for now. Let's concentrate on this, which is a quite important setting. Execute concurrent builds. Now concurrent builds what? Parallel builds. Like if I execute this job one after the other 2 times, okay, so it will create 2 builds. As I told you, right, the build is nothing but the execution. So if I execute this job one after the other 2 times in successive sessions, like immediately if I run the job and immediately again I start the new execution of it, so it will generate the concurrent builds, parallel builds. So would you like to have the concurrent builds execution for the job, or you want the build execution to be sequential? So if you are in quick succession, if you are triggering 2 builds of a particular job, then do you want the second build to wait until the first one completes, or you want both the builds to be executed parallel? This is that setting. In the advanced, yeah, so here let's go and see few settings here. Quiet period. Now what is this quiet period? I think I had mentioned this in one of the previous sessions. This quiet period means once you trigger the build, the execution, if you have this quiet period selected, and if you set here, say for example 20 seconds. Now this is very important setting. Why I am telling you this? Now let's say you have configured this job for auto trigger. Auto trigger is, you have the setting where as soon as your developer checks in the code, okay, to the Git repository, then you want to trigger the job. This is how you have configured the job, let's say. Okay, now let's say there are Aishwarya, Ramyashri, Jayesh, Sampada and myself. We 5 people are there in the team. Now Aishwarya checks in the code to the repository. So as soon as she checks in the code, Jenkins will trigger the build, and by default the build execution would be triggered after 6 seconds. It will just wait for 6 seconds and it will trigger the build. Now let's say Sampada checks in her code. After this 6 seconds, Sampada checks in. Then Rameshri, after that, some time, after some time, she checks in. Jayesh checks in. I checked in. So unnecessarily these number of bits would be executed, right? Whereas we might want that everyone's check-in should be considered and only one build should be triggered. Say, not only the build should not only be triggered for Aishwarya, but let's say if within the same period of time, right? Then if some other developers also they check in the code, then you want the build to be only a single build to be triggered. So you can have the, let's say, 60 seconds of quiet period here. So let's say Aishwarya checks in the code, build will trigger, but it will not start its execution. It will wait in a queue. Okay. And let's say within this 60 seconds, other fellow developers also check in the code. So for everyone's check-in, everyone's code which they have checked in would be part of the build execution which had been initiated by the check-in of Aishwarya's check-in ID. Right? But if you want, let's say, you do not want to club the check-ins of multiple developers in a single build, then you can have this set to as less value as possible. What is the advantage of this is, let's say Aishwarya checks in the code, now the build runs, build is successful. Then say Sampada checks in the code, now the Sampada's check-in would only be part of this new build, and if that build fails, it means that Sampada's change has caused the issue in the application. If you club together the check-ins of different developers, and if the build fails, then it would be very difficult to understand whose check-in has actually caused the build to fail. So you need to have the detailed analysis there. So now it depends upon the, as I said, like it's up to the team that how they want this to be. Certain teams do not want the changes of multiple developers to be clubbed together in a single build, so they will keep as less value as possible here. If the teams are fine with, let's say, setting it to some not to a very long period of time, something like 1 minute is too long actually, because in that particular time span, if multiple developers checks in the code, then everyone's check-in would be considered for a build, and then if it fails, then it would be very difficult to analyze whose change has caused the build to fail. So it's always advisable not to set it to a value which is too low, and not to set it to the value which is too long. So you can have some kind of a, like, wherein you would be able to only consider the check-ins by 2 developers maximum, not more than that. So you can work out this in a team, like the time you want to set here. But that is what the quiet period is. Now retry count. Now the retry count is where you are pulling the code from the source code. I mean, Jenkins is pulling the code from the source code, and now if that source code SCM repository, due to some network lag or some disconnection, Jenkins is not able to reach to the SCM, then you will configure here how many retries you want Jenkins to perform. Okay, so that is what this is. So we will say 3. Maximum 3 retries it will do that, and if it doesn't work, then it will fail the execution. So block build when upstream project is building. Now upstream is what? Upstream project means the caller of this job. So caller of the job is called upstream, and the one which is called downstream. So let's say job 1, we have 2 jobs, job 1 and job 2. So job 1 calls job 2. Okay, so this job 1 is upstream, and this job 2 is called downstream. Okay, now what this setting says that, do you want to hold on to the execution of the job 2 until the job 1 completes? So if this job 2 depends completely upon, so whatever the artifacts the job 1 is generating, job 2 should take those artifacts and then it should take those artifacts to the next level. That is the main task of this job 2. Say this job 1 is about the packaging of the build, and this job 2 is responsible for deploying that. So obviously the job 2 should it need to wait until the job 1 completes its task of generating that artifact. Otherwise, how it would be able to deploy it, right? So it completely depending upon the execution. Rather, it wants to get started off once the job 1 completes its desired task, right? So in that case, you will have this block build when upstream project is building. Settings check. Block build when downstream project is building. Now, if this particular job has another job, say job 3. So this is again the downstream job for job 2. So this is downstream for job 2. So if you consider this job 2, then job 1 is upstream and job 3 is downstream job. Now what do you want to happen with the build execution of this job 2? Whether you want to hold the execution or block the execution of a build, so that let's say this job 2 will give a call to job 3, job 3 will complete and will come back to the job 2 again. That is how the function also executes, right? So function execution is blocked until the caller completes. So when we have functions like fun1 calling fun2 calling fun3, so when the function 2 calls function 3, the execution of the function 2 gets blocked until the fun3 completes and comes back, right? That is the concept here. Then custom workspace. So custom workspace is like every job has got its working directory. It's called workspace. So let's say you are pulling the code as a part of the job execution step. You are pulling the code from Git. So every job when you run, so I will show you just a minute. Let me go to the Jenkins. This is where my Jenkins is. And let me go to the jobs. Now do you see here there is a folder, my Jenkins job 2. This is the job we are talking about right now, my Jenkins job. This is its workspace. This directory is its workspace. By default, your jobs workspace gets created in this folder, program data, Jenkins, .jenkins jobs. So you will have this folder, and inside that you will have the directory with the name of the job created, right? And this directory is nothing but the workspace, a working directory in short. So if you want some different directory to be the workspace, then you can mention here. So if you click here now, then it will tell you like, workspace directory. So by default it is in the Jenkins home, but if you want this directory to be created at some other place, then you can mention that. That's not a problem. And then display name. So display name is, I would say, Jenkins demo. So this is the name which would be displayed for a job. Then keep the build logs of dependencies. Like if this particular job has got the downstream jobs, as I told you, so those are nothing but dependency jobs. Dependency not in terms of the library dependencies, but when the job 1 calls job 2 and job 2 calls job 3. So these job 2, job 3 are nothing but the dependency jobs of job 1, because this job 1 has delegated a few tasks to job 2 and the job 2 has delegated further tasks into job 3. That is how it has been divided, right? So do you want to keep the logs of the dependency jobs, or you are only interested in keeping the logs of only the main job 1? That is what this setting is. Then source code management, SCM. So if you want to pull the code from the Git or any of the source code management system, then you will configure that here. If your job is not required to pull in any source code, then you will have this set to none, else you will set the Git repository. We will talk about it a little later. Then build triggers. So trigger builds remotely, meaning if you guys remember, I had mentioned, I think 1 or 2 lectures back, I had mentioned about Jenkins CLI, wherein you can trigger the Jenkins build from the command line interface. So your server is running here, Jenkins server, and you are on some another machine, and you want to trigger the build using some kind of a CLI command line. In that case, you will set the set this to checked, so that the build can be triggered from some different machine through CLI. That is what this setting is. Then build periodically. Now this is build periodically is when you want a particular job build to be executed. Let's say, now this is quite common practice in a teams, that team decides some time in a day to trigger the builds. Let's say 6:30 p.m. evening. That is the time, let's say, team has decided to trigger the build every day. So they will configure that schedule here, so that whoever developers want their particular changes to be part of the today's build, they need to make sure that they check in the code to the Git repository before this 6:30 p.m. schedule time. So build periodically is where your job gets triggered on a particular time, a particular time of a day, right? So that is what build periodically. Poll SCM. Now this is where the job gets executed as soon as developer checks in the code to source control repository, SCM, source code management. So when you say poll SCM, so now let's understand what this poll SCM is. Now let's say you have defined your Git repository here. We will see how to define it, but let's say you have defined that Git repository here. Now Jenkins keep on checking that repository if there is any new check-in to the repository, if there is new check-in to the repository. So Jenkins just keeps on checking the repository for new check-ins. Now this process of checking the Git repository every now and then is called polling. What does it call? Polling. So you can configure here what should be the interval between the two polls. So let's say you want Jenkins to poll the SCM after every minute, say for example. After every minute it will poll, or after every 30 seconds it will check. So it will check the Git repository. If there is no check-in, it will not do anything. After 30 seconds again it will check, is there any check-in to the Git repository configured here? If it is there, then it will start the build. So this is the polling, and you can configure the polling time. The way you can configure the schedule, you can configure the poll time also. Then comes this section. So here every Jenkins job generates a console log. It generates the console. I'll show you that, but it generates the console log. If you want the timestamp, that is the current date and time, to be part of that console log, so it would be very easy for you to debug the job output, then you can check in this setting. Now build step is the actual the main point here. The build step where you actually implement the different steps of the job. Look, so these steps. Pulling would be done as soon as you configure the Git repository. Once you configure the Git repository, it pulls it to start the execution. So you don't need to provide any particular build step for it to pull the repo, but the rest of the things would be the build steps. This nothing but a build step. So you can configure your build steps here. So let's say I would configure execute Windows batch command, and for now I'll just keep it very simple. Echo hi. Echo is like print hi. This is my build step. So you can keep on adding the different build steps here. So considering this job, we will have these as our build steps. Post build action. Now what do you want to do once the job is done? Once the build execution is done. So let's say you want to send the email notification to the developers or to the testers or to the entire team, maybe, that the build is created and it is available. So that you can configure here, post build section. So you can configure, mostly email notification is something we configure, right? So this is what would be executed once the execution is done. So let me save this. I have just simply configured one build step, echo. Then I do not want to poll SCM as of now because I have not configured the SCM. I'll just say none. We will configure the SCM afterwards. Then let's go up and let me see. Okay, this is fine, quiet period and all. My build is not parameterized, so let me uncheck this. So I want to keep the builds for 10 days and only maximum 5 builds I want to keep, and this is just the description. Let me see. So I have saved the configurations. So you can see this Jenkins demo, this name is coming from this setting which I had just done here. I'll show you that setting one more time. See here. Here I had defined a display name. Just a minute. Advanced. Somewhere here. Yeah, here. See. This is the display name. So this name would be displayed to the job. And the original name, my Jenkins job, the repository, the workspace would still be having that old name. And this is simply the display name which would be displayed to you on the UI of the Jenkins. But every other place, the job would be referred to with this name only, the old name. So if you want to keep the display name, mostly the display names we keep quite intuitive. Like let's say you are creating a Java library, so you would put the display name as build Java library, kind of the name you would put, which you want that name to be displayed on the UI, whereas the name by which it is being referred to in other places, it could be different. It doesn't matter. Right now, let's execute this job. I'll just show you how to execute. Let's come back to the dashboard. Now we have got two jobs. Now if we want to execute, I'll simply click here. So it says that build schedule. And let's wait. So it will start the execution of the build. So as soon as the build execution starts, you would see, so there is a build executed. You can see Jenkins demo 1. The build is executed. You can see here there is one execution of the build which is done, which took 1.4 seconds. Okay, and let me show you how it looks like in a queue. So what I'll do is I'll just go here and let me go to the configure. I'll just increase this quiet period a bit so that it will wait in a queue for some time before the actual execution of the build starts. So I would say, let's say 35 minutes, or let's say 60 seconds, sorry, not minutes. And I would go down here and I would have some more commands. Echo, this is Jenkins job. Let's go back to the dashboard and trigger one more execution. So we have triggered. So when you have a SCM configured, no, so there it shows that it is pulling. Like if your job execution takes a time, right, which has got a lot of things to do, then it shows you the job execution. Now it should show us the queue, build in queue. Now the execution is done. It is like this time is not sufficient enough to show it here, but otherwise as soon as the build triggers, it shows that build in the queue here, and once the execution starts, where it moves that entry here in the build executor status, and here we see the execution. Never the mind, but let's see the output now. Now we have got, for this job, we have got total 2 builds executed. Let's go inside this. So you can see here build history. So you can see here there are 2 build executions which are done. Build 1, build 2, and both the builds are in a green marked. So it indicates that both the executions are successful. Now if you want to see the log of a particular execution, then you can click on that and it will take you to the section inside the build, and here you can check the console output. So you can check here what the Jenkins did. So you can see here it says that building in workspace. So this is the default workspace directory. If we had asked our Jenkins to pull the code from Git, then it would have pulled it inside this. Everything, whatever it will generate, or it will pull, or it will generate, those things would be done inside the workspace directory. So that is what workspace is. It's a working directory where the Jenkins creates its artifacts. The job creates its artifacts. Then you can see here hi has been printed, and this is the current directory. Always for any build step execution, the workspace directory is the current directory. You can see this is the current directory, a workspace directory, right? And you can see the execution, and finally you can see the execution state. Now let's trigger few more executions of this build. Let's say 3, 4. So you can see here now build execution status it is showing. So I have executed few more executions. Yeah. So let's go to the dashboard, and we have got 7 executions so far. And let's see this. Now you can see here it has only kept 5 builds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The old 2 it has deleted those. Why? Because we had configured, if you remember, we had configured that we want to keep only maximum 5 builds. So it will keep only recent 5 builds execution. The ones which are older than the recent 5 would be deleted, right? So this is what the configuration is. Now let's go and check here these things. So here you can see the workspace. So this is the workspace directory. Now this workspace directory doesn't have any files here, so it is not showing anything. But you can wipe out the current workspace. If you wish to delete the files created in the workspace directory, you can delete those from here, right? Then build now. You can trigger the build from here also. You don't need to go to the dashboard to trigger the build. You can trigger it from here also. Rename. If you wish to rename the job, you can rename it from here. If you wish to delete, you can delete the particular job from this link, right? Right. This is the basic understanding. Now if you want to just click here, all those options which you see after going inside, you see those options here as well, like build now, configure, delete, rename. Those options we can see once we go inside it, right? So those options are available to you from here as well, right? This is the main point. Now if you wish to delete, you can go here and you can delete the project. So job would be deleted, and in that case that directory, the workspace directory, would also be deleted from this location, right? So this is what is the basic understanding of a job and different configuration parameters for a particular job.